Raising children is difficult, and with so much information out there, it's hard to know what advice to trust. The Child Psych podcast brings you the top parenting and mental health experts in the world. This podcast is designed to encourage and educate you with the most up-to-date research and concrete strategies that foster healing and resiliency in children and teens, and tools that make parenting easier. Whether you're a professional or parent, you will walk away with answers that empower you, and you'll feel more confident knowing you are on the right path. Most importantly, we're here because we need to raise a generation of children who don't need to recover from their childhoods. Hello and welcome to the Child Psych podcast. I'm Tania Johnson.
And I'm Tammy Schamuhn.
And we are the co-founders of the Institute of Child Psychology. We're also registered play therapists. Tammy's a registered play therapist supervisor. And we are mums to, between the two of us, 5 gorgeous kids.
Yeah, and we're so excited to be talking with you today about something that comes up for every single parent on the planet. You are not alone in this, which is what happens when your child starts lying to you. Which is highly triggering for a lot of parents. I know for me as a child, that is the only reason I was ever spanked as a child, actually, was because of lying.
Yeah. You know what? When I think back on my childhood, not that I was spanked, but anytime there was a lie, I think it was so triggering for my parents that was where there was a timeout or something was removed for a long period of time. That was a massive, massive trigger for my parents too.
Oh, yeah. Honesty was a big attribute. But, we know so much more now about child development and what is normal in terms of what happens in the preschool years. And we're going to share that with you today. We're going to talk to you about the top 4 reasons why kids lie. And then we're going to talk about what do you say to them and how does discipline kind of fit into this? Because parents, I think, want to handle this well, but they also want to hold their kids accountable, which to me makes a lot of sense. You want to raise responsible, honest children.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe we should start on talking about how it's developmentally normal. Yeah. And then move on from there. So when our kids are really little, so, at 1, 2, it starts to change at about 3. But I want you to imagine almost like speech bubbles coming out of a child's head. And when they're 1, their thoughts, that little speech bubble that's there, they think that your speech bubble is always the same as their speech bubble. They don't realize that it's different. Same at 2. What I'm thinking, mommy's thinking. If I think that the juice is in the fridge, mommy's absolutely thinking that the juice is in the fridge, even if mommy knows that the juice is not in the fridge. By about 3, and definitely by 4 for many children, they start to realize, oh, this is interesting. I can say something or think something, and it's different from what my parent is thinking. And as they start to realize this is part of that individuation, that separation process, they start to go, and this happens, like I said, around 4, they go, I can say something, and maybe mommy or daddy or grandma is going to actually believe it. And that's where we start to see. And as we said, this is completely appropriate developmentally for our kids. It's that separation process, and that I can have separate thoughts, and that I can shift those thoughts sometimes to get away with something or to make somebody believe something that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, no, and there's concrete research to say this is so normal. The University of Waterloo looked at 4-year-olds and 6-year-olds and then adults. Mm-hmm. So your 4-year-olds lie on average about once every 2 hours.
Wow.
And your 6-year-olds are once an hour.
So that's incredible.
Yeah, and 96% of all young children lie. So I mean, there's only 4%, and even then, I'm like, how do you know for sure they don't?
Yeah.
But then adults lie every day, 1 to 2 times a day. So I mean, we got to cut kids a break, because you think of the small times we exaggerate things. Just something small, saying oh yeah, I just watched 2 episodes of Netflix, and you watched 5. These little slight shifts in perception that we just say. We don't think of them as big things, but funny when our kids do it, the magnifying glass is blowing it up. Because I think as a parent, part of us feels betrayed. We feel insecure. We feel fear. We're worried. If they keep lying like this, and what if they're in trouble? And then I can't help get them out of it because I don't know if they're telling the truth or not. And kind of this indignance, like, how dare you? I do all these things for you. And now you're not being honest with me. And I don't know. I think it just really plays on parents' insecurities about the kind of job that they're doing as a parent when it's actually part of like their developmental process. That
Totally.
they're learning that what goes on in their head is different than someone else's, and they kind of play with it a little bit.
Totally. And just to finish off that developmental arc, we also know that seniors lie less than adults. So it's something that I think by the time we reach those senior years, we just go, no, I actually don't have to do this anymore. But I think it's part of our survival, right? Like you said, we lie all day in little ways. It's just, I think that we're clever with our lies. Whereas with little ones, we can go like, hold on. Like they just don't have that cognitive sophistication yet to create a good lie. Whereas I think sometimes we fool even ourselves as parents.
Yeah. And I think kids lie for really concrete reasons. The number one, like the number one reason kids lie is to avoid punishment. Like, because they think like there's going to be a consequence coming. And young kids especially can't differentiate between where the punishment is coming from. Like, is a punishment coming because of the thing they did or because of the lie they said? So that's really important. We can touch on consequences for this because we want to be really careful because we don't want to come down so harsh that kids lie more because of what happens for not telling the truth versus maybe them making repairs for the thing that they did that they're trying to cover up, if that makes sense. We want to be really, really careful because we can encourage that. So if kids are trying to avoid shame and like a spanking or separation from us, like they're going to lie more. And the studies are pretty concrete about that. The more parents use punishment instead of discipline, which are two different things, they are more likely to have a child that lies. But also kids lie just like adults do to avoid hurting someone's feelings. Just like my husband might tell me like, yeah, you look great today. Like that shirt looks great. But really, like maybe I put a few pounds on over the holidays and it's not fitting me right. But he loves me and he's a good man. So he's going to say that, right? And also their imagination is like they want the story to be more exciting. They want to embellish because they want to feel seen for you to pay attention. So they'll exaggerate everything that's gone on. And then kind of the last piece is they wish it was true. So they're saying something, but it's really a wish. Like if they lied to you when you saw them knock over a glass of milk, they're like, I didn't do that. What they're really saying is, I wish I didn't do that. So if
Yeah.
we can see it as a wish to say, I wish that didn't happen, I think maybe we can be kind of less reactive. So we're thinking like, are they avoiding hurting feelings? Are they avoiding punishment? Is it a wish that like they wish it was true? And is it just their imagination because they just really want to be visible to you? They just want to seem more exciting, more intriguing to you because you're just their favorite person in the whole world.
Yeah, and I think under that wish fulfillment category comes imagination too. And I've definitely seen this with my youngest. She's 6. It's not as prominent as it was when she was 4 or 5, but she would say things like, Mommy, I just saw Santa's sleigh going past the window. And she'd tell her sister, you didn't see it, but I just saw Santa's sleigh. So there's also that wish fulfillment that's happening there.
Yeah. So hopefully that for anyone listening, that reduces reactivity a little bit. And just to tell you, like our kids lie, my teenager lies, but I noticed it the most with my stepdaughters. Actually, when I first came into the home as a stepmom, the discipline that was done, we had to kind of revamp. And it was a lot of yelling. It was a lot of blaming, a lot of shaming when the girls would make mistakes. And we had to kind of change that narrative a little bit to reduce the lying because I noticed it a lot just at the beginning for the first year. And there was so much reprogramming with the kids. And the biggest thing was they didn't want to get yelled at. Like that was the biggest thing. They were so scared of getting yelled at. And they couldn't like explicate this. Like it's not like they could say, I don't want you to yell at me. They were, even though they were 10 and 4, there was just this, like, you could just see their eyes. And it was just, I don't want to say trauma response, but they were just terrified that a female was going to yell at them, especially me. So lots around, which we can talk about. And I don't know, Tanya, you can kind of tag on. I can say what I said to my kids when you have to maybe I didn't program them, but I had to help deprogram them.
Yeah. I think when I think back on the times that I noticed it the most with my children, it was probably with my foster kids. And for them, it was more a sense of survival.
Yeah.
So when I tell certain untruths, it helps to keep us safe. And for them, it was a safety thing. So they were keeping themselves safe, even in situations where they didn't need to be kept safe. And so for me, honestly, there was lots of work outside of the lying just to go, you're safe, you're loved, you can share things with me and you will not be hurt, you will not be punished. But there was lots of work that had to happen outside of the situation in order for them to feel safe during those vulnerable moments where they were lying.
And that's a really good point, Tan, and thanks for sharing that, because I think when we know, or we feel like in our gut as a parent that, darn it, like my kids are probably lying because yes, I have yelled or I've spanked them or whatever it is. And you're trying to be a better parent and you're trying to, or maybe another parent or someone else has done this. And like Tanya, in my case, we were reprogramming some other narratives that had gone on that came before us. I think we need to put aside consequences for a second here and focus on the relationship and cultivating safety for these kids. They need to feel that they can tell the truth. But if, they're so concerned that if they tell the truth, they will be hurt or the connection will be jeopardized. I think it's not even physically hurt, if that makes sense. Like it's that they will lose their person, like they will lose that attachment. They won't receive love. That's also really scary for kids. So I know we want to have these responsible citizens. We want to have these kids who are honest and have integrity. Like I completely get that. But first, we have to say, I think, relationship first,
Yeah,
safety first, before we do anything else.
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so I think as we talk about that relationship, I find that in our house, talking to the kids about honesty and how it's an important value of ours is really important, again, outside of the moment. So it always comes up in our conversations. For us, it's about connection and being vulnerable and being honest. We talk to the girls about that in appropriate language all of the time. And then just giving them examples like, oh, mommy said that she was going to have a report done and I forgot. And I had to tell the team that I'd forgot. So just little examples, not where we're like teaching where they go, oh, here they go again with the lying and values and lectures, but just little places where we can show, yes, this is what's important and this is how I'm living it in my own life.
Yeah, I think I think it always starts with us, right? Is we have to model the attributes we want to see in our kids, and we have to model how to correct mistakes when they happen.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, so what do you do? So maybe you're like, okay, I get it. It's because it's a wish, or it's because of this. Now what do I say to my kid? I really like this one strategy from Dr. Laura Markham. Actually, she's a colleague of ours and we've worked with her a lot. And it came from, I wish I knew where it came from. I think her blog. I was reading and it was really lovely. So I want to give Laura, credit here. Her first step that she says when you work with a child who's lying is don't ask, tell. So if your child you're going to eat dinner and you've asked your child to wash their hands and they say they have, which is actually one of the reasons my kids lie the most. Oh yeah, I washed them. And
Yeah.
they didn't. Like you could just look, you're like,
Yeah.
you didn't wash your freaking hands. So instead of asking them, did you wash your hands? You're just going to tell them you need to go wash your hands. They've said it. So we're not, it's covert. We're not, going to directly call them on it. We could then say the second step would be recognize the wish, which would be, I know you wish they were already washed because you don't like it, but you need to go do it. And the third step is always ensure to keep your limits strong. It's just, if they don't, we just insist this is the rule before dinner, but we don't launch in with this imperative to, how dare you lie to me and this and this and this. Like that is just going to make kids want to hide themselves.
Oh,
So that's one way. So don't ask, tell, recognize the wish, and just set some limits around what you're asking.
which I love, Tim, because I feel like we do it so differently in mainstream parenting. So if somebody put Sharpie on the wall and we know it was our kid, they were the only one home, the thing that we go to as parents is, did you put the Sharpie on the wall? Or who put the Sharpie on the wall when we know it was them? So really, we're setting them up for failure in those instances. And I love that this is just so direct. So if you drew a Sharpie on the wall, how are you going to fix it? Or if they're little, he has a magic eraser to get the Sharpie off the wall, whatever it might be. But I love that we don't intentionally set our kids up for failure in those steps.
Yeah. Granted, like that is just one method. I have used that, but I've also just said to my kids flat out, and Tan, you can chime in with how you do it, is I will just think about this instance where like I literally saw my kids do something like I mentioned, like spilling something on the carpet. And this is when I first had my stepdaughters. I just came into this parental relationship with them. And just this, bug-eyed. And I just looked at them and I said, I knew it was them. And I said, I think someone spilled the milk. And of course they launch into, I didn't, I didn't, and I didn't. And I just said, you know what, kiddos, you're not in trouble for accidents. Things happen. You're only responsible for fixing it. So what we need to do, I can help you and we'll clean it up. But you're human, you make mistakes, that's okay. And then we help clean it up. And I want you to know that it took me a year of consistently saying things like mistakes are okay. Mistakes are okay. Mistakes are okay. And it was so funny because I think this is just something it's now on autopilot. My son, we're pulling out of the driveway on the weekend and I forgot something. I don't know. Like we were late and Aiden chimes up in the backseat. Mom, mistakes are okay. You're a human being. And I'm like,
I love it. I love it. It's working.
So he likes to remind me of, it's neat to see him like correct when I'm, saying I screwed something up. He'll remind me of that too. And just that it's okay. You're not in trouble. Like all you need to do is make it right. So if we spill something, we clean it up. And this is the discipline piece, if we break something, we tried our best to fix it or come tell an adult. And, all of these things, like maybe they don't know how to apologize. Like we have to teach them that, like you hurt someone's feelings. And what's more helpful than punishing them is to teach them the correct way to, repair that relationship with their sibling. Like that's what we want ultimately, is for them to take accountability.
Totally. As you think about that example, I think too, in the relationships that our children witness, it's really important too. So I'll give you an example on our side. About a week ago, my husband and I, we very rarely have more energetic arguments in front of the girls. And it's okay to argue in front of your kids as long as they see that there's repair afterwards. And we want to argue well. So we don't want to completely, cut the other person down, but it's okay for them to see us argue well and then repair. But this was a more energetic argument between my husband and I over a misunderstanding. And the girls were in the back of the car, so they heard it all. And when we got home, him and I had some time and some space. And then we sat down with the girls and we said to them, you know what? Sometimes misunderstandings and mistakes happen. And what happened between mom and dad there wasn't okay. And we wanted to sit down and talk to all of you. So I think even in those examples where they go, oh, this is not just about, mom and me or dad and me and where I'm perhaps misstepping. This happens to mom and dad too. And this is how they make it better.
Yeah, those repairs, because I think that's important. It happens with our spouses, it happens with our friendships, and then we model the same formula then with our kids. So we model it and then we do it with them, and then they will start repairing. My kids at this point mess up, they fix it, because that's always been my number one discipline strategy, especially when we're trying to get kids to stop lying, is we're not jumping to a punishment, because if we punish, they often, which means to inflict like harm, they'll up the ante with the lying, because they're just really just trying to avoid that thing. But for me, it's just being like, you're human. And in our family, so I always start with in our family, when we make a mistake, we do our best to fix the mistake. Yeah. And that is it. And then we let it go. And I think that's one problem with parents, is when kids start lying at about 4, there's a lot of discussion about it. They want to like make it a therapy session, and those kids' brains are not prepared for adult conversations. So once we've addressed this and the kiddo, we teach them to make it right, or we do that 3 steps that Laura Markham I mentioned earlier: don't ask, tell, recognize the wish, and set your limits. Drop it. You don't need to rehash it. You don't need to revisit it. All that language is going to do is overwhelm your kiddo. It's just a simple redirect done over and over is going to form those neural networks of truth telling in your child's brain. But it takes a few years, and you will see it start to go down at 6. It'll start to go down. You'll notice it. They'll embellish a little bit, but it's not the same as between 4 and 6, in my opinion. That's what I've seen with the kids.
I agree. And I think the other thing between 4 and 6 is that they're still very, very, very concrete. So 6-year-olds still are concrete, but at 4 to 6-year-olds, for example, if I say, we're going to go swimming at 1 o'clock, and we get to the pool and the pool's closed and it only opens at 3 o'clock. And children in that age gap will say, you lied. You said that the pool was supposed to be open. Whereas in this case, it's probably a very honest mistake. So they still, anything that doesn't fit reality in a very concrete way, as we start to talk to them about different concepts of lying and truth holding, they tend to see it as very concrete. Mommy lied about swimming. And so as we start to work with that and say, sometimes things don't work out the way that we want, we start to teach them a little bit more, but that's a little bit more abstract in concept. We start to see that shift at around 6.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, that's good. They're trying to differentiate. They're trying to also call us out on our stuff, because they're saying, you're holding me to this standard. So what does that mean? I specifically actually remember my son asking me one time, do adults lie? Because he had lied, and he was just trying to normalize for himself that, like, he is human. And I said, yes. And he asked why. Like, well, why do you lie? Like, don't you tell me? This was the look on his face. You don't tell me the truth? And it was like, oh my goodness. So we had that discussion that sometimes even adults will say things that are a small lie because we don't want to hurt someone's feelings. And sometimes that is better than hurting someone's feelings. So we don't tell, like,
absolutely
the whole truth. And of course, coming up for examples for that is kind of tricky. But I don't know if I would say to my kids, like, I would never lie to you, because ultimately at some point they're going to catch you in a small embellishment.
Yeah.
And so, but I would say we try our best to be honest as much as we can in our family, but everybody will make mistakes here, buddy.
Yeah. And I mean, the research shows that as kids get a little bit older, those smaller lies increase to kind of save face or really not hurt somebody's feelings. So yes, Grandma, I love your cookies. Means some might not actually love those cookies. But we see those sorts of lies really increasing as our kids get older.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that was helpful to everyone. It's a tricky thing, but you're not alone in it, and all kids are going to go through this, and adults do it too. So don't forget, you're human as well, and we do this every day, 1 to 2 times a day. So we can't hold kids to a higher standard than we hold ourselves.
Yeah, and I think the biggest message we would love for everybody listening out there is just tread gently with your kids. This is normal developmentally, and keep asking yourself, how do I want to guide them? What do they need here? What skills are they lacking? How do I move slowly? How do we make it better? If we could do it again, what would I do differently? How do I make this better? Because that's where the teaching lies. It's not in punishment.
Did you hit stop?
No.